get a movie made? Can you explain the exact process?
If only there was a process. There's so many different ways to get a movie made, and that's partly the tricky part, is where to start and what method to go about it. But fundamentally, it requires resources, it requires money, enlisting people on your vision, and having a very clear vision of what you want to do and how you want that to interact with the world. So I would say, it obviously starts with a good story. You then have to have resources or people contributing resources to that. But it's certainly not easy, and so it takes a lot of determination and gusto to keep it moving.
So it sounds like each project that you've worked on, because you have quite a few under your belt or that you've been a part of, is different each time?
Yeah, every project that comes together is a bit different, and usually it takes a tremendous amount of, I guess, me believing in myself that we can pull something off even when it looks like the odds are stacked against us. There's been projects where we were a week away from filming and we didn't have all the money to finish filming. And it was just, we'll get there, we'll figure it out. And then we were able to close the financing the last week of filming. At least for me, there's always a strong sense in which things always seem to work themselves out. And so I think that's in turn sort of led to a lot of confidence. And also, that I put myself around other people who I can depend on and rely on. And and sometimes, take these risks, but we sort of say, okay, we'll figure it out as we go.
So if you were to help another filmmaker that has never made a film, and let's suppose they want to get an investor, do you have the script first, or do you have someone that you think can get you to that investor and you have just an idea?
You certainly, in going to an investor, have to have all of your sort of ducks in a row. You need to have a script, you need to have a lookbook, you need to have a budget. As it's sort of been outlined, for me, you need to show them that you have a good idea and that you have the people to be able to pull it off. And so it's those key things. And also what I found too is momentum behind you. You have to have momentum behind you, because it's always very easy for that investor to say, I love it, I want to put money into it, but let me know when you're a little further along. And so you need to give a clear sense that, well, this is going, right? We're a month away from filming, or this is right around the corner. And you need to also mean it, right? It's not just a sort of smoke and mirrors. If that investor goes away, you need to also know that you are filming. Definitely don't oversell. But it's that type of environment that brings people in and gets people excited, and certainly in believing in yourself, others are also going to believe in you too.
And so a lookbook would be used even for a documentary?
Certainly, I mean, people love visuals, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell something to somebody that doesn't exist, right? If I said, hey, I've got this house, do you want to buy it? I've got these blueprints. It's not going to be as effective as if I say, well, now you can walk through this whole CAD design of the house itself, right? You can even put on this VR headset and sort of walk into the home and take a look, right? Then it's real. And that's always the hardest thing, is how to, and this is why people, do sort of like what they call rip-o-matics, where they kind of recut other films to kind of give a sense of the look and style. Because you're trying to make something real now that people can put their money into, that gives a whole 3D sort of fully immersive view of what it is to watch that film ultimately in theaters.
How often are you hired as a director, and how often are you working as a director on one of your own projects?
As often as possible, I'm directing projects of my own. And then from time to time, I am also hired on other projects. it is, I'd say no to a lot more that I'm asked to direct, but it does happen, and certainly, you know, getting into larger and larger films, and certainly open to the idea. But I've just found that the stories that I kind of cultivate, whether it's buying a script or whether it's you know, writing something my own, or hiring a writer to do, that generally, in putting in all that time, I can increase the odds greatly that that film will actually get made. Whereas, you know, sometimes projects that come in, they are moving and then things fall apart and then they come back again. And so I think largely it's a function of time, and also just how far and how ready that project is to go before I step in to direct it.
When you say buying a script, are you actively looking for ones on, let's say, a website that has scripts for sale, or are people presenting them to you?
So people will contact me from time to time. We generally don't accept unsolicited materials. There's a couple companies around town that I've asked to just sort of pass me projects if they really believe in them. And then I have a sort of network of writers that I know that all, you know, hire on various things. We don't option projects, which is a bit different than other companies, because our view is that if we're going to make the film, we're going to make the film. So you know, we're not kind of wasting time on optioning it, so we just outright buy it. And yeah, but you know, it's always a very fluid process, and you know, for now we kind of have the next 2 projects set out and kind of made our calendar for the rest of 2022. But yeah, it's never you know, precise. But we always are looking for projects that really resonate and that we feel can connect with audiences.
Do you think there's an energy to working on multiple projects at one time?
Certainly having lots of irons in the fire is I feel a necessity for working in film. You know, sometimes things just take longer, actor availability, and, you know, things need to be moved around. And so to go back and say, okay, well, this one we're going to, you know, bump up on the priority list as a result, can be really, really helpful. And there's certainly a strong sense of convergence of working with different actors or different distributors or different sales companies that then kind of provide the infrastructure for more films to come down a similar path. And so certainly, you know, as many irons in the fire as possible without, you know, compromising quality, and yeah, without compromising, you know, the core things of what it is to make a good movie.
Do you have like a different spreadsheet for each project? Like, how do you delineate each one?
I tend to just kind of keep it all in my head. So I keep a to-do list, basically weekly, of sort of full, you know, double page of all the things that need to happen on a specific project. And then when I do go into direct, I basically pass all of the tasks off on other projects, off to my other producers or other coordinators. And the reason is directing, I feel, needs to be completely all in, that everything around is quiet, that you're just there being present to, you know, all the department heads, to the actors, and to that story and that world itself.
How do you raise money for a movie?
The way to raise money for a film is really to, you know, start with the people that you know. If you're doing an independent film, you know, there's crowdfunding platforms, or it's to package the film and really, you know, put a director on board, to put actors on board, to put other key producers on board, and then to take it to a studio, you know, to take it to a production company, or to take it to independent film financiers. There's so many different ways and scales and manners to pull together a film, depending on the genre and the budget level. But what I always do, and I think this is why, you know, I've been able to turn around so many films, is I sort of put what's the best case scenario, sometimes millions of dollars that it would take to pull a project off. And then what's the scenario where we absolutely, bare minimum, we're able to pull this off while still having really good production value. And so we create this kind of accordion between the two. And oftentimes, we may say, okay, well, here's, what the number is, but we still don't have it. How can we start? How can we at least sort of move things further down the line, build sets and hire people and, get things going so that we show that this is happening, this is the vision, and then, bring in investors as we go.
Can you talk about how you've done that with your last 3 films, which I believe are all documentaries and one narrative, or no?
So for my last couple films, the way we've really leaned into, making the movie first and keeping that as a priority, and then, finances coming later, is first on a project that I'm doing with the writer of Ratatouille called The Inventor. It's a stop motion film that is just very, very time consuming to do. So we actually launched first with a Kickstarter and then used, some of that money to get the studio up and running, and we built sets and we built puppets and costumes and simultaneously we raised private equity from other folks, and that funded the studio for an entire year. And we haven't announced it yet, but we've got two pretty big distribution deals that are about to land. And that's because we showed, we believe in ourselves, we believe in this film, we had top talent attached to it, and we took it to Cannes, most recently, and did a number of deals there, and are just about to announce our next one. But that was just like leaning into it, right? And constantly questions were, how do we keep the studio open? How do we keep everybody paid? And we just kept figuring it out month by month and getting a little bit further. Do we need to put things on pause? Do we need to spread out the work over a longer period of time? And ultimately, everything just kept falling into place every single month. But it was very much a leap of faith. And I have this, I have the saying of any film I'm working on, there's always a moment where it says, there's always a test. There's always something that happens that sort of this voice from the world saying, do you really want this? Do you really want to make this film? Okay, show me. And so that's those sort of major leaps of faith that, you'll jump with your team, that you have something really special, and ultimately, you'll land. But it's certainly a lot of risk, and I wouldn't recommend it for everybody.
Did you get the top name talent attached after the crowdfunding?
We had them attached before. We had shot a teaser for the film to sort of give people an idea of the look. We just literally at each step of the way, we're like, how can we drive this forward now? And just time and time again. And then how can we find other partners that can help? There's a quote, when you begin to act, you discover your hidden allies. And so it's so important to act, to get out there and to engage with people and find those allies who believe in your vision as much as you do.
And then to what you said earlier, that there'll be a point where the universe will say, are you sure you really want this? And do you want this? And maybe you need to show me. And that to really, I think I'm sure every project has at least one or two of those moments.
Yeah.
And then the other two that you financed or had financed?
Yeah, so the other two projects where we did something similar was, again, where we sort of set off not having all of the funds and raised it, sometimes in the final weeks of filming. And but yeah, always it was. And this isn't like insane risk. Like we always had and we're never asking, any of the people that work for us to take any risk whatsoever. But it essentially was, we either raise the money or we put it on a bunch of credit cards, And we didn't have to do that. But yeah, it did really take that. And I think it's so hard to make independent film these days. I mean, especially adding in COVID, that you just have to be super hungry. And in my case, things have worked out, but it certainly hasn't been from a lack of trying.
Right. And then one of your documentaries, you had Ice-T involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so did he approach you with a film, or you had already been working on it?
So we did a film called Public Enemy No. 1 that looked at drug use in America. And we also knew that we wanted to get the word out there, and specifically about how this was locking up minorities left and right. And this is obviously such a terrible legacy of the drug war. And so we reached out to Ice-T's people and showed him the project, and he came on and did an interview for us, and also became an executive producer of the film. And I've been very fortunate that other of my projects, we've had really fantastic and generous high profile individuals come on board and say, this is something that we see as important. Whether it was 7 Days in Syria with Angelina Jolie, or our most recent project, How to Build a Truth Engine with George Clooney, that really helped it get out into the world, and that, of course, helps with distributors and builds momentum. So the way that I found to bring on executive producers is first, find out people that really are sympathetic to that particular cause. People that ultimately you want to create a win-win, and people aren't going to just out of pity or out of one reason or another say yes to a project. Like, it needs to be organic, it needs to be core values, and that's what it is about finding fellow allies. And so yeah, we just sort of ask around and call their reps and put a teaser in front of them, and if it's an immediate no, so be it. But we just really show that just with their involvement, projects can really take flight, and sometimes people are willing to help, and it's phenomenal when they do, and then we're also very, very respectful of their time and of them lending their name, and it very much is about mutual trust. And so you need to be in a place to be able to gain that or establish that in any relationship when working with a high profile EP.
And so with 7 Days in Syria, it was a finished film, and then you showed it to Angelina Jolie?
Exactly.
Okay. And then, but with the movie about, you said Public Enemy?
The most recent, Public Enemy No. 1 also is finished.
It was finished. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. And then you got Ice-T to do the interview.
Exactly. And we cut it into the film.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then with this latest film, if you're
with How to Build a Truth Engine, we have a sort of sample edit of the project, and so that's something we've been taking out and showing to different people, and that's really what was sort of the tease of saying, okay, this isn't just words on a page. I can see the quality of the filmmaking. I can see the characters you're following at New York Times and others. That there's no question mark about what the vision and what the impact is here, and finding people that are ready to jump onto that.